بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah we'll continue in our Kitab, that is Sullam al-Munawraq, in the knowledge of Mantiq. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and with the understanding, and may Allah bless us with goodness and in dunya and akhirah. Make this session a reason and may our sins and forgiven, our prayers are answered. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So inshallah ta'ala, today we will enter into the chapter where Al-Imam Al-Akhdari mentioned Faslun fil Aqsil Mustawi. So this is the chapter that we are going into. So basically the meaning of Aqs is conversion, which we will speak about. But before we enter into this, I will just make some revision on what we have mentioned in the last chapter. The last chapter we spoke about Tanaqud, and we mentioned that Tanaqud is about these contradictories, and if you come out with two propositions, and one is contradicting with one another, so that it means that only one will be the truth. So we gave examples on the meaning of this. So let me just run through the examples one more time, because last week I illustrated on the blank document but maybe it is not really clear because of the handwriting, because I use it using my mouse. So now what actually I did was I put it in Microsoft Word, so it becomes easier, inshallah. So just I need to give some revision on what we have covered. When we speak about Tanaqud, these contradictories, we gave the examples Qadiyya Shakhsiyya, Zaydun Qa'imun, Zaydun Laysa Biqa'im. So we have the first proposition. This is called Qadiyya Shakhsiyya, because it is specifically speaks about particular person by the name of Zayd. So now if you have a proposition and Zayd is standing, this is the simplest example. Zayd is standing. How do you get the opposite? By putting in the nafi. You put in the kayfiyya, it becomes a negative in a sentence. A positive sentence and you make it negative, then you get the opposite. So Zaydun qa'imun, Zaydun laysa biqa'im. So only one will be correct, because these are contradictories. We cannot be saying Zayd is standing and not standing at the same time. Now, this is in terms of the change in terms of the kayfiyya, the how. So in Mantiq, when we speak about al-kayf, we're speaking about positive or negative. So Tanaqud, the first example we gave when comes to Qadiyya Shakhsiyya, we place in the negative, or the positive, to get the opposite. And then we have Qadiyya Muhmala. Qadiyya Muhmala is Qadiyya that does not include any of the sur, of the kam, that is kullu and ba'd, all or some. If propositions are not preceded by all or some, it is muhmala. In the Arabic we call it muhmala. The example is al-insanu hayawan. So al-insan, we mentioned that this is muhmala. There is no kull or ba'd, where we say that is the kam. So al-insanu hayawan, how you get the opposite? We add a negative to it. Al-insan laysa bihayawan. Al-insan hayawan, al-insan laysa bihayawan. So this is an opposite of the first. So this is what is mentioned. فَنَقِيدُ الْإِنسان الْحَيَوَانِ لَا شَيْءَ مِنَ الْإِنسَانِ بِحَيَوَانِ. So this is another form of contradiction. So when we have al-insanu hayawan, so we can also use la shay'a min al-insani bihayawan. La shay'a min al-insani hayawan. So here we have what you call it, the negative, universal. We have any the negative and universal. And then we have any the musawwara. Kullu insan hayawan. Any all humans any are hayawan. All humans are. Earlier we mentioned al insanu hayawan. So it means any humans any are beings. Human are living beings. Al insan laysa bi hayawan. Yani humans any are not living beings. That is the opposite. But if you add any kullu insan hayawan, kullu insan any hayawan, this is, we call it kulliya mujiba or kulliya mujaba. It is a positive any sentence any that is inclusive any of kul, of all. So kullu insan hayawan, this is a positive any sentence. So the opposite is saliba juz'iyya, laysa ba'dul insan bi hayawan. None of the part, any part any of insan is a being. So that is any the opposite. And likewise any we have any, if the sentence any is saliba kulliya la shay'a minal insani bi faras, then it is contradicted any with mujaba juz'iyya, ba'dul insan faras. This is basically what we covered any in our last any lesson. So basically the chapter of tanaqud, yani it speaks any about the contradictories any in a sense that it cannot be both any correct, any only one must be correct. Any why? Because any the meaning are the opposites. And we are speaking any about propositions any having any opposite meanings. So only one any is true, the other one is false. So this is basically what any our author any meant any by tanaqud. So this is what any we have covered in our last lesson. So there are many other examples. So today inshallah ta'ala we will enter yani into, as what any we mentioned, we speak any about al-aqsul mustawi. Al-aqs al-mustawi. So this is going any to be our lesson any today. The author any mentioned al-aqsu qalbu juz'ay qadiyyah ma'a baqa'is sidqi wal kayfiyyati wal kammi illa al-mujib al-kulliyah fa'awwiduha al-mujib al-juz'iyyah. So we will speak any about these two first. The first sentence the author began by mentioning the definition. By mentioning the definition yani of al-aqs. What is any the meaning any of aqs? So he say qalbu juz'ay al-qadiyyah. So what is any the meaning any of juz'ay al-qadiyyah? We mentioned any that there is this subject and predicate. In English we have any the subject and predicate. Let us any go. I will just give a simple example. Yani, so for example, we say no foxes are rats. No foxes are rats. So now we have any foxes in the front part, that is the subject, and then we have the predicate. So what happens if we change it? We say no rats are foxes. So basically we make the subject becomes the predicate, and the predicate becomes the subject. So maybe we can look at the definition, and this mentioned by one of the commentaries, one of the commentaries of Sullam and Munawwar, that speaks about the definition. So they say al-aqsu lughatan at-tabdil. Yani al-aqs meaning at-tabdil, to change, wal qalb, to turn the other way. Wal aqsu min ahkam al-qadaya kama sabaqa kat-tanaqud wa huwa an-naw'an. So in the chapter of aqs there are two types. We have aqsul mustawi and aqsul naqid. And aqsul naqid, and he said qisman aqsul naqid muwafiq wa mukhalif. But this is not mentioned by Al-Imam Akhdari in his Sullam. In Sullam, he only speaks about one type of aqs. That is aqsul mustawi. That is aqsul mustawi. We will look at this is one of the explanations by Sheikh Sain Fuda. So he mentioned for example, istilahan قلب جزء القضية بأن يجعل الموضوع محمولا والمحمول موضوعا في الحملية. So this one I mentioned earlier. No foxes are rats, and no rats are foxes. So basically, we are taking the subject and it becomes a predicate. Predicate becomes the subject, but the meaning stays the meaning stays as a truthful proposition when we change. So you can change the subject becomes the predicate becomes a subject. How do you maintain the truthfulness of the sentence? This is the thing. This is what the author is going to speak about. Sometimes it can be true, but sometimes the meaning can change. So there are certain conditions, and if you want to do that, if you want to change the subject becomes the predicate and to maintain the truthfulness of the proposition. So he mentioned this is in terms of the proposition changing of the subject and the subject and the predicate. So he mentioned وبجعل المقدم تالية والتالي مقدم في شرطية المتصلة. Last time we spoke about شرطية متصلة and شرطية منفصلة. Conditional propositions that are binded. This is what is meant in this particular chapter. So because propositions they are not binded and it's not inclusive of this chapter, which we mentioned later inshallah ta'ala. So he mentioned qawaidul aqs. So these are the conditions if you want to do this conversion of the subject and it becomes the predicate, and the predicate and it becomes a subject. So he mentioned there are a few principles. Number one, he said al-ula baqa'u sidqi fil aqsi. So if you want to do the conversion, the truthfulness must remain. Ay in kana al-aslu sadiqan lazima sidqul aqs. So if what you call it, the first proposition is true, earlier I gave the examples. No foxes are rats. No foxes are rats. This is a true statement. So if we converse, then what happens? We say no rats are foxes. Can you see? I change the place. So no problem. We say this is a correct form of conversion. Asaniya, you say baqa'ul kayf. Baqa'u al-kayf, the positivity and negativity must change. So just now I use a negative a particle, I say no foxes are rats. When I change rats in the place of foxes, I must maintain the negativity. So no foxes are rats, no rats are foxes. But the moment if I change it into positive sentence, what happens? If I say no foxes are rats, and then I say rats are foxes, now this is not correct. This is a contradictory. This becomes tanaqud. Then he mentioned فَإِنْ كَانَ الْأَصْلُ مُوجِبًا فَالْعَكْسُ مُوجِبًا وَإِنْ كَانَ سَالِبًا فَسَالِبًا. If it is a positive sentence, it remains a positive sentence. If it is a negative sentence, and it remains as a negative sentence. You cannot change positive to negative. This is the second principle or condition. Number three, he say baqa'ul kam. Al-kam here, and he speaks about universal and particular. Universal and particular. In Arabic, we use the term kullu and ba'du. In English, all or some. And even if you look at books of law, universal, the second sentence must also be universal. If the first sentence is particular, the second sentence must be particular. So this is what he's saying. Wa in kana juz'iyan fa juz'i illa fil mujabatil kulliyah. Except in one situation of mujaba al kulliyah fala yabqa fiha al kam bal tan'akisu juz'iyah. The universal now it changes to particular. So what is the example he gave? He said kullu insan hayawan. Kullu insan hayawan. What is the meaning of kullu insan hayawan? Beings, some of beings is humans. Some of beings some beings are humans. Now this is a true sentence. Some beings, because beings we have human beings and we have animals and so on and so forth. So when we say some of beings are humans, it is a true sentence. It is a true proposition, because humans are part of beings. Humans are part of beings. So when we say some humans are beings, or some beings are humans, it is a correct sentence. So this is, we are changing any the subject and the predicate. So when we are speaking about kulliya mujiba, a positive universal proposition, then we have to use juz'iyya. We use juz'iyya yani sentence. Ba'dul hayawan insan. We use any the word some yani beings are human. So this is how yani we converse. This is how yani we converse. So the kulliya becomes juz'iyya. The kulliya becomes any juz'iyya. Maybe let me see. I broke out some of this. Okay. Let us look at this. So now when the author is saying the first three conditions, the third any condition, and he mentioned any that the universal must follow universal, the positive and he must follow the positive. Illa fil mujiba kulliya. This is what he said. Fala yabqa fiha al-kam bal tan'akisu juz'iyya. So if you have mujiba kulliya, you have any to change. The universal becomes any a particular. So the example is kullu insan hayawan, and all humans are beings. Fa'aksuha, yani the converse any is ba'dul hayawan insan. So now we change the kul to ba'd. Can you see? Yani we change any the kul any to ba'd. So we change the universal and it becomes any particular. So here we converse. We change. This is aks. So the hayawan takes the hayawan becomes any the subject. Insan becomes any the predicate. So if you change the universal and it becomes any particular, then only the sentence and you will be correct. Then only the sentence and you will be correct. So if you say kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings, and then ba'dul insan hayawan, some beings any are humans. Now this is correct. This is no problem. This is no problem. But what happens any if you do not change this any to particular? So you say kullu insan hayawan, kullu hayawan insan. Now it becomes any a false statement. Kullul hayawan insan. Why kullul hayawan insan is a false statement? Because you are saying all beings are humans. This is not correct. Because beings, there are much more before mujaba al kulliya, as example we gave earlier. Fa'awwiduha al mujaba al juz'iyya. So change it to mujaba al juz'iyya. This is what we are speaking about. Kullu insan hayawan fa'aksuha ba'dul hayawan insan. So now when we are changing kulliya mujaba, now it becomes juz'iyya. It becomes contains two elements, khissatain. What are the two elements? If a proposition is a negative sentence, point number one, and it is particular. So if you have a negative particular proposition, there is no way I need to do this conversion, because you cannot get the results. You cannot get you cannot maintain the truthfulness of the proposition. If the nature of the proposition, the origin of proposition, it consists of negativity and particular. So this is what the author is saying. So what does it mean? So again, inshallah, we will look at the example. So let us look at this. So the الشرح mentioned ولا عكس صحيح في جميع القضايا ولازم لها دائما بصورة سابقة إلا الفرق. Beings consists of humans and non-humans. So when we say some beings are not humans, it is a correct sentence, because not all beings are humans. Animals are also beings, as what we mentioned. So when we say so many beings are not any humans, yes, correct. Any animals, for example, they are not any humans, but they are beings. Type, you cannot perform any acts. So for example, if I say ba'd, okay, if I do acts here, it is not valid. It is not valid. So if I say ba'dul insan laysa bihayawan, ba'dul insan laysa bihayawan, this is not a true proposition, Because the meaning is some humans are not beings. No, this is wrong. Yani all humans are beings. So I cannot be using this. Tamam? So this is what the author meant. Yani if in a proposition there is particular and negativity, you cannot do any conversion. You cannot do any conversion to the proposition. And then lastly he mentioned والعكس في مرتب بالطبع وليس في مرتب بالوضع. So we have covered all these three parts. The last one we covered earlier is والعكس لازم لغير ما وجد. So he said that aks is applicable to every kind of propositions as mentioned, but it is not applied to a proposition where there is the khissatain. The khissatain goes back into two things. One thing is the particular, the other one is the negativity. And then lastly he mentioned والعكس في مرتب بالطبع وليس في مرتب بالوضع. And also this aks or this conversion is only applicable to a certain type of proposition. So we mentioned that proposition, there are two types in our session, our previous session when we speak about qadaya. Qadaya, there are two types of qadaya. One is shartiya, the other one is we have qadaya muttasila afwan. We have qadaya muttasila and we have qadaya munfasila. We have qadaya muttasila and qadaya munfasila. So the author is saying basically qadaya munfasila cannot be applied in aks. What is qadaya munfasila? So let us look at this example. This is an example of proposition that is detached. So for example if you say al adad imma zawjun aw fardun, numbers are either even or odd. Numbers are either even or odd. This kind of proposition we cannot perform the conversion. We cannot perform the conversion because there is no difference at all, because we are using imma or. So if you are using or and you make a conversion, there is no difference at all. Because imagine if I say al-adad imma zawju aw fardun, if I change fard to zawj, I say al-adad imma fardun aw zawjun, the meaning is the same. The meaning is the same. It is just replacing one another without any difference at all. So he said لو قدمت فيه الثاني على الأول وقلت العدد إما فرد أو زوج لا يتغير معناه. The meaning doesn't change. فعلم أن الترتيب إنما هو في مجرد الوضع والذكر. So this kind of sequence is just a sequence that is applied. A sequence that is arranged. That is arranged. So this cannot be within the chapter of conversion because it doesn't change in the meaning. So what is the thing? What is the thing that the author is speaking here? What types of proposition that the author is speaking? So the author is speaking about a type of proposition, that is not munfasila, but it is a proposition that is attached with a subject and a predicate. So before we end we just look at some of the explanation. So what is meant by the author is qadaya shartiyah. This is what he say wa ma'na shartiyah. He said thumma inna al-aksa la yakunu illa fil hamliyah wa shartiyat al-muttasila. كما تقدم تمثيل ذلك فيشترط إذن في صحة العكس أن يكون في قضية مرتبة بالطبع لا بالوضع والترتيب الطبيعي ما اقتضاه المعنى بحيث يتغير بتغيره. So there must be a change of meaning, and when you change any subject and predicate, there is a change in meaning. Then only we can perform this conversion. But if the meaning doesn't change, then we cannot perform that conversion. So basically what the author is saying is that the exceptional case where conversion cannot be applied to sentences or propositions that are munfasila. In Arabic we call it munfasila, where if you change the subject or the predicate, it doesn't make any difference in the meaning. As such, the concept of conversion cannot be applied. So as what he gave the example earlier, al-adad imma zawj aw fard. So this is an example of a proposition that is based on a condition that is unattached. So it can be A or it can be B. So if you change A and B, it doesn't make any difference. But it is different than saying for example, all humans are beings. All humans are beings. So that this is not or either or, but this is a proposition that can be true or false. So when we say humans are beings, now this is the proposition that we can apply conversion. So if you say humans are all humans are beings, then we converse and we say all some beings are humans. That's what we mentioned. Then only this conversion can be applied. So basically the sentences must be sentences based on the subject and predicate that are established, that are conditional, not something that is just an either or any propositions that cannot contain the application of conversion. Wallahu alam bisawab. The author Al-Imam Al-Akhdari did not mention another type of aqs, that is aqsun naqid. So in Sullam and Munawraq, he didn't mention an aqsun naqid. But if you read the commentaries of Sullam, the scholars will mention about aqsun naqid, because Al-Imam Al-Akhdari in Sullam he maintained simplicity in some of the discussions that were mentioned. But of course in the later books, our scholars will speak about the other type of al-aqs. And inshallah ta'ala in our next session, we will enter into syllogism, the chapter of al-qiyas. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with tawfiq and hidayah. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Before that, the last thing I mentioned is the last part. Wal aqsu fi murattabin bi tab'i. So murattabun bi tab'i is speaking about propositions that are that have a proper structure of subject and predicate, where the meaning changes if you change the subject and the predicate. So this is murattabun bi tab'. Wa laysa murattabin bil wad'i, and it is not sentences that are based on just sequence that has no that makes no difference if we change the subject and the predicate. So only propositions that if you converse, the subject becomes a predicate and predicate becomes a subject, the meaning changes, then only is applicable to this al-aqs al-mustawi. But for propositions where there is no change in meaning, it cannot be applied to this chapter of al-aqs al-mustawi. So this is basically what he is mentioning. So inshallah in our next lesson we will enter into the chapter of syllogism. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.